Welcome to Echoes of Scripture. In this week's show, we won't be racing there Saturday and Sunday, but on Sundays, we have to stop racing at 10 o'clock and can't start again until noon for the church that's on the other side of the track.
Earthly Kingdoms Will Come to an End was the title of the message.
And in your typical methodology, it was all fire and brimstone, turn or burn.
Wow. Must have had a guest speaker that day.
Sell all your earthly possessions and give them to us because all the kingdoms are going to fall.
This is definitely the most extensive passage Romans is, but yeah, I mean, it just reminds us that God ultimately sovereignly in control of the governments that are in power at any time, and it's hard for us to understand, knowing that they're obviously evil governments, ones that want to destroy us or destroy other people or wipe people groups out, all this kinds of stuff, right? And we don't understand how that all works together.
It's interesting to see some of the guys obviously hadn't played baseball since Little League.
Oh boy.
But some of them were pretty stout. The Republicans won, the GOP won 11-2. On the comedic side, it definitely explains why guys can never figure out women and why guys are so simple.
Right.
Having learned these verses long time ago, as much as I can remember to do this, whenever I'm shaking my head about decisions being made and the direction that we're going in the governance pattern is, I need to pray for these guys. Hey everybody, it's Doug Cornelius, host of Echoes of Scripture. In this week's show, we talked to Pastor Greg Berlisle of the Darby Creek Church about his message from May 3rd regarding Haggai chapter 2. So if you're interested in the Old Testament, stand by. If you're not, well, you should listen anyway. So here we go. Well, welcome back.
It's good to be back. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. And I actually lined up some additional guests while you were out, but never got to pull the trigger on it for various causes and reasons. So I don't think we've recorded anything since April, and it's June 11th.
I know, man. Time flies.
So how was your time off?
It was nice. Yeah, we in the mountains of Georgia there, and it was beautiful. Kind of like it was here in Ohio, though. The second week we got rained out of anything we wanted to do outside. But it was nice just to relax, read some books, do some fun stuff.
So while you were gone, my race team moved into first place for the series championship. So we're pretty excited about that.
That's great.
Yeah, we're 400 points ahead of second place. So that's the equivalent of winning 4 races ahead of them. And so that's a lot of fun. If the listeners don't know, we got a bunch of guys from Darby Creek that are also on the team. Real blessing to me. It's a lot of fun to be with them for sure.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
What's your next race?
We're actually racing next weekend, which is the Friday before Father's Day up at Gingerman, which is outside of New Haven, Michigan. Will literally be 7 miles from Lake Michigan.
Oh, wow.
So it's like someone dropped a racetrack in the middle of a nice city park. So people camp there and everything, and then wake up to the sound of motors.
Wow.
We won't be racing there Saturday and Sunday, but on Sundays, we have to stop racing at 10 o'clock and can't start again until noon for the church that's on the other side of the track. So,
okay.
So
that was nice that they do that.
Yeah. So pretty fun stuff.
That's great.
All right. So our last plan session was going to be in response or reinforcing your May 3rd message, if you can remember all the way back then.
I had to pull my notes up when you sent me the email. I'm like, Haggai, that was so long ago.
Right? So Haggai, you're in chapter two. The theme is
Earthly kingdoms will come to an end was the
yes,
title of the message.
and in your typical methodology, it was all fire and brimstone, turn or burn. Um,
Wow. Must
sell
have had a
all
guest
your
speaker that day.
sell all your earthly possessions and give them to
Right.
us because all the kingdoms are going to fall. And speaking of kingdoms falling, though, did you watch the congressional baseball game yesterday?
No, I did. Was this Senate versus, was this like, is it the two aisles against each other? Is that?
It is, yeah, and it's the full Congress. So
Wow.
it's interesting to see some of the guys obviously hadn't played baseball since Little League. Uh,
Oh boy.
but some of them were pretty stout. The Republicans won, the GOP won 11-2.
Oh
So
wow. That's a smoke out.
that is, yes, especially
Wow.
in peaceful times. But it was fun. I only watched like an inning, but it was kind of fun seeing the boys be boys and setting aside the sides of the aisle that they're on, and
Man,
pretty fun.
am I okay? Was this this sounds funny. Was this am I remembering something that was real or was this in a movie? But was there I feel like at one of these games, wasn't there violence that broke out? Not between the
Yes.
teams, but some people were shot.
Yeah, it wasn't anybody from the teams that yeah, like you said, it wasn't the teams fighting, but yeah, there was
Yeah.
some boy, I feel like that was a long time ago.
Yes. I don't know why I remember that. That's just the kind of things that my wife asked me, why can't you remember the other thing I told
Yeah,
you this like a minute ago? But you couldn't remember
exactly.
that.
So I'm thankful that we live in a country like that,
Mhm.
where it's vehemently opposing each other and speaking poorly of each other, but yet they can go play a game together.
Yeah.
So we are certainly blessed to be born here and raised here and live here and all that. So,
Mhm.
um, and then I did some interesting studies on kingdoms and cultures that have evaporated. The most interesting thing for me was, do you know when the Roman Empire actually was finally sunset?
I don't have any idea. No.
1806.
Really?
Yeah.
That seems rather late.
So there was this ongoing remnant
Wow.
of the Roman Empire,
Hmm.
and there was a guy in Germany that
Mhm.
was still considered the emperor, and Napoleon Bonaparte was the Confederation of the Rhine. There were some German prince there, and he abdicated. But before he abdicated, he dissolved the empire so that Napoleon could not be the one who
It
took
could
over the
be
Roman
the
Empire.
emperor. Wow.
So I had
That
no
is a bit
idea.
of trivia. I had no idea.
Yeah,
Wow.
I thought for sure Genghis Khan or somebody like that had done it.
Hmm.
Now, certainly over time, the empire had shrunk, and you do see things like that. The Byzantine Empire, um, they fell in 1453 after a big rift with the I guess you would call the big Roman Empire.
Hmm.
Chinese dynasties, the Tang dynasty fell in 907 after 10 kingdom periods. So about 250 years. And that was because of overextension, thought a little bit too much of themselves. So pretty interesting things. We get to look back over history, and um, you know, one of the things that Haggai is really hanging on is, God is going to be there for the people. He hears their cries, and don't give up on him. Don't put your hope in uh, human empires, for they'll pass. So
Yeah.
that's where you got the destruction of the worldly governments, um, will surely come.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of shows you just how, time passes, these kingdoms come, they go. And that was kind of part of one of the things that Haggai is communicating, right? um, there in chapter 2, which is kind of the message you were referring to, where he says in verse 21, "Speak to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, saying, I'm about to shake the heavens and the earth and to overthrow the throne of kingdoms. I'm about to destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the nations and overthrow the chariots and their riders," which I think is a reference kind of he's getting them to think back to when um, God delivered them out of Egypt and from the power of the Egyptians and so on in the slavery, saying that, I did it once, I can do it again. And so he's making that promise that, even though, there were the powers, that had actually taken the people of God into captivity and into exile because God was allowing that to happen to discipline his people. But he did promise that he would gather them back, which he was in the process of doing here in the time of Haggai, and they're starting to rebuild the temple and all this stuff. So yeah, he's just trying to remind them that, these kingdoms are um, within his control, I guess, if you might say. And then ultimately he finishes up in that at the end of the book there of Haggai, talking future, basically, that the Davidic God's promise to King David that somebody would always sit on his throne, right?
Right.
Um, would ultimately be fulfilled in Jesus Christ. So that Davidic covenant that was made, he kind of reconnected it in this passage, where he talks about, how does he say it here in verse 23? On that day, meaning, some future time yet to happen, declares the Lord of hosts, I will take you, O Zerubbabel, my servant, the son of Shealtiel, declares the Lord, and make you like a signet ring, for I have chosen you, declares the Lord of hosts. And without spending a lot of time on it, when you do your homework on this, you see that, well, Jesus is actually in the line of Zerubbabel. And as often happens with some of the prophetic literature, there's a future fulfillment, maybe even at the time a present, partial fulfillment. But it's really kind of cool to see the connections there, that, this promise that God made to David, that, someone would always be on the throne forever and ever, and is ultimately yet, right, when at the time it was written, yet to be fulfilled, but it would be fulfilled in Jesus Christ, who now sits and reigns from the right hand of God, right? So yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think our takeaways from those few verses basically were that God's in control. He's sovereign over all kingdoms and all the powers in the world, at all throughout history. Um, Also, too, it just reminds us that he keeps his promises, right? He made that promise to King David, and he's going to make good on it. And then also he has a purpose for each one of us. Like, Zerubbabel had a purpose back then. God was using him. And in fact, we don't even know really what happened to him much after that. Those words that were written in Haggai, we don't. It seems like he just kind of faded off, but he played a role, right? He played a purpose in the kingdom, in the temple, and so on being rebuilt. And so that passage reminds us the fact that we each have a purpose in God's kingdom's plan. We may think it's insignificant, but it's not to God. So
Haggai is making reference back to um, the Jews running from Egypt, and they get to the Red Sea,
Mhm.
and God parts the sea. The Israelites walk on the bottom of the sea on dry land, get across. Um, they know that the Egyptians are coming with chariots and horses and all kinds of, just going to overpower them. And then God closes the sea, and Miriam has that song,
Yeah.
but there was a time where Egypt was used for God's people as a saving nation.
Right.
So, Joseph was taken there captive. He worked with the Pharaoh. They came up with a plan
Mhm.
for the impending um, famine and save nations after nations after nations.
Right.
But um, where, and I'm glad you brought this up a couple of times in the message about where do you put your hope and faith and all that.
Hmm.
Um, as time went by, um, the leadership of Egypt became focused inwardly and afraid of the Jewish nation and enslaved them and
Hmm.
went rogue. Um, so something that's I found super interesting. I just saw this week. About 7,000 years ago, 95% of the diversity of the male white chromosome disappeared. Um,
Mm.
and they're the same scientists that follow such things. They were able to detect in the women's X chromosomes that there is still, you know, a bazillion fold, and yes, that's scientific, um, variation in women's chromosomes. So they still have quite a bit of independence, but we're only
Mhm.
down to about 5% of differentiation. So on the comedic side, it definitely explains why guys can never figure out women and why guys are so simple. Um,
Right. That's a good one.
but
Yeah.
the thing that happened that they could trace it back to, and they look everywhere from burial grounds to the way that crops became more and more available over Eurasia and Africa, is as mankind became less nomadic and started to settle, they started owning things.
Hmm.
And then men started wanting other men's stuff. And so they would start wiping
Okay.
each other out.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it was that significant that they wiped out 95% of the unique Y chromosome. So, uh,
Gee.
yeah. So, I mean, it's not surprising that we can't put our
They
hope in
couldn't just go
man.
down to Home Depot and get one like the other guy had.
Right, exactly. That's
Wow.
so women, you're right. Your man is so simple, and guys, we're right. We'll
Uh,
never figure them out.
that's
But
right. Oh.
um, so that took down let's see, the diversity on the male specific Y chromosome plummeted so drastically that it appears that as though there were only one reproducing male for every 17 female.
Oh boy.
Um, and this happened across Africa, Asia, and Europe. So
Okay.
um, now this just came out in 2015, so this is not stuff we would have learned about in high school and all that. So,
Right.
but it was absolutely had to do with clans fighting and eradicating, and they would kill all the males, capture all the
Right.
women, so the women kept their diversity.
Yeah. Wow.
And then with power comes social hierarchy.
Hmm.
So that really limited on who could breed, so to speak.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's interesting.
Wow.
So when left to
Fascinating.
our own volition,
It's gonna kill each other.
we are going to kill each
Wow.
other. So it's
Crazy.
super interesting stuff, and hopefully that didn't depress anybody too much. Um,
Uh,
so there should be this righteous indignation for people of faith, Christians that really put God first and seek His kingdom first, and all that. But let's talk about how might we help the young Christian who's reading Romans 13, 1 through 7, and I'll read that.
mhm.
Let every person be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this, you also pay taxes. For the
Uh,
authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, and honor to whom honor is owed. I feel like that's kind of self-explanatory, but
mhm.
any additional thoughts to, how do you balance whoever's in power, whether it's your little locale like us here in Grove City, or the governor or the president or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, several takeaways I think from the passage. And also too, just to remember before I mention that, this is not the only time something like this is mentioned. Like Titus 3:1 says, remind them to be submissive to rulers, authorities, to be obedient, to be ready for every good work. And First Peter 2:13 says, be subject to the Lord for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor or as supreme, and then it goes on. But so just in case somebody just think that that concept is just, a one-off here,
Yeah.
this is definitely the most extensive passage Romans is. But yeah, I mean, it just reminds us that God ultimately sovereignly in control of the governments that are in power at any time, and we may. It's hard for us to understand, knowing that they're obviously evil governments, ones that want to destroy us or destroy other people or wipe people groups out, all this kinds of stuff, right? And we don't understand how that all works together, you know. But I mean, certainly, God's not, he's somehow working all this for his plan. We don't know, but we do know that how government is supposed to function,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's mentioned in here is that it's supposed to, they're supposed to reward good conduct and put down evil conduct, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's really, um, it should remind every government like what ultimately one of the things they're supposed to do. Um, and it says there that, government, it says he is the servant of God. And so um, that's a good word to anybody that's in power, right? To say
Yeah. I
you're
mean, what
supposed to
an
be a servant of
attitude
God.
change, right?
What's what?
Think about the attitude change we might need to take towards some of these leaders, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, we may not agree with every, policy thing that somebody has, but really, I mean, this whole area of being subject to someone else is kind of an affront to a lot of the Western mind, right? An independent mindset and so on. But that's how so much of our lives are. I mean, you have a boss, I have a boss. We that's a simple way to look at it, but we're supposed to be subject to our boss, right? Um, and it goes from there to other structures, whether it's in the home or government or whatever. But yeah, our attitude, yeah, and this is interesting. It really doesn't. I mean, it's yeah, in our actions, but also in our hearts, be
mhm.
subject to. Um, and yeah, there's times we know when we may need to disobey the government if they're asking us to do something that's against what God would want us to do. Um, but but this is the first step, really. It should be our lead with respect of authority, right? That's what we should lead with, and and I think that yes, I mean God's going to judge the nations. I was thinking about this too recently. I've been in Psalm 2 for a number of different reasons, But why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain?
Mm-hmm.
The kings of the earth set themselves and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. And he who sits on the heavens laughs, right? I mean, it's just, it helps you put it into perspective. The nations, right, that are proud and evil and are not thinking about that they're supposed to be a servant of God, right? They are setting themselves up against God and they rage against him, right? And that's the
Yeah.
thing. We have to realize, leave that God's going to judge them ultimately.
Having learned these verses long time ago, as much as I can remember to do this, whenever I'm shaking my head about
Mhm.
decisions being made and
Yeah.
the direction that we're going in a governance pattern, is I need to pray for these guys. I need to pray for these
Yes,
ladies.
exactly. Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Thanks again for listening to us this week. On your streaming app, we sure would love to hear from you. Some of the apps like Spotify have send us a text. Send that to us with any questions you have or future topics you'd like to hear from us. All right. Take care.